Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're to be looking at some of the major battles that shaped the course of European history. I've had a whole stack of sources here. Maps and timelines and all sorts of goodies, and I'm excited to dig in. Well, I think it's always interesting to see how these battles sort of act as these flashpoints. Yeah, they reveal these deeper trends that are already kind of bubbling under the surface. Right, it's rarely just about who's got the bigger army, yours is, the sharper swords. It's about all these, political machinations and the economic realities. It is sometimes even personalities. Yeah, absolutely. So to kick things off, let's talk about Sparta. Everybody knows the Spartans, these legendary warriors. Right. But their story is really one of decline. It is, and a lot of it can be traced back to this kind of shrewd, maybe even cynical deal they made with the Persian Empire. Yeah, that's definitely a key turning point. They had suffered some losses to both Persia and other Greek rivals, and they essentially went to the Persians with a proposition. They said, look, if we crumble, are you really going to benefit more from this new Greek alliance than you did from us? Interesting. So almost like a controlled chaos where Sparta is this powerhouse, but by keeping everyone else in check, they're actually benefiting Persia. Persia liked a fractured Greece, with Sparta keeping everyone else down. So in exchange for this kind of pragmatic pact, Sparta basically handed over control of all the Greek colonies in Asia Minor. Was a difficult thing for them to give up. Not really, they didn't actually have any colonies in Asia Minor. It was more like sacrificing somebody else's territory to bolster their own position. And this agreement was formalized in something called the Anticitus Peace Treaty in 386 BC. That gave Persia official control of those colonies, and it forced the disbanding of pretty much every other Greek alliance, except of course for Sparta's own Peloponnesian League. It's Sparta really playing power politics here. Oh yeah, securing their own dominance. Yeah, at least for a while. Yeah, for a time. But even with Persian backing, their decline seemed inevitable. It was. What were some of the factors that contributed to their downfall? Well, years of constant warfare had definitely taken their toll on their resources and manpower, and their rigid social structure and their emphasis on land ownership, that all kind of led to economic stagnation. Their population was dwindling, life for ordinary Spartans was becoming increasingly difficult, the signs were there. Yeah, and those signs became impossible to ignore in 371 BC with their defeat at the hands of Thebes. That's right. It's almost hard to believe that the Spartans were reduced to less than 1,000 households after that, utterly unable to maintain their grip on power. It really is kind of a cautionary tale. Yeah, it really is. As out over-reliance on military might, right, at the expense of everything else, at the expense of all the other things you need to have a thriving society. Exactly. Yeah. But while Sparta was fading, another major player in Greek history was facing their own set of challenges. Athens, and their decline seems to be closely tied to their economic model. It is, right? Being a maritime power, they were heavily reliant on trade. Absolutely, which made them incredibly vulnerable when conflict disrupted the flow of goods and resources. Exactly, and to illustrate this, let's look at the port of Piraeus. The heart of Athenian commerce. In 413 BC, their annual trade volume was a massive 4,500 talents. Just 13 years later, that number had plummeted to 1,600. Wow, that is a staggering drop. It is. Never anyone who may not know, a talent was an ancient unit of weight, or roughly 26 kilograms in ancient Greece. Right. For talking about immense quantities of goods flowing through that port. When that trade dried up, what impact did that have on Athenian society? Well, the lack of essential imports, especially food, led to shortages and widespread unrest. People were struggling just to survive, let alone participate in the political life of the city. It's amazing how much economic stability underpins everything. It really does, including political stability and social cohesion. Yeah. So, as these titans of the Greek world, Sparta and Athens were grappling with their own internal issues. A new power was quietly rising in the north, the Kingdom of Macedon. And unlike the city-states we've been discussing, Macedon was a monarchy, which seems to have given them a distinct advantage in this period of upheaval. That's a really crucial point. While the city-states were exhausting themselves in these endless conflicts, often with each other, Macedon, under a single ruler, could operate with more centralized control and a more unified strategic vision. They weren't above playing both sides either, During the Greco-Persian Wars, for example, they formally submitted to Persia, but at the same time they were secretly providing intelligence to the Greeks. So they were hedging their bets, profiting from the chaos. They were very astute. Wow, what a fascinating strategy. It is, and they continued this approach during the Peloponnesian War, happily selling timber and other resources to both Athens and Sparta. So almost like a businessman, seeing an opportunity and capitalizing on it, regardless of the human cost. Yeah, Macedon was playing the long game. While the Greek city-states were busy tearing each other apart, they were, in the process, amassing wealth and resources. Which brings us to 359 BC, and the rise of the figure who would truly change the course of history. Philip II. Philip II, tell me about this guy. Ambitious, ruthless, and a brilliant military strategist. He inherited a kingdom that was poised for greatness, and he was determined to seize that opportunity. Okay, so before we delve into his conquests, we need to understand the military innovation that made his army nearly unstoppable. Okay? The Macedonian phalanx. Is one of those military formations that captures the imagination. It does. 256 soldiers arranged in a 16 by 16 grid, each wielding a sarissa, a spear that could be up to 6 meters long. It's a pretty imposing sight. That must have been terrifying. Oh, absolutely. To behold on the battlefield. Imagine facing that wall of spears coming at you. Up. The psychological impact alone must have been devastating. The first few ranks would advance with their sarissas leveled, while the ranks behind them held theirs aloft, ready to replace any falling comrades. It created this nearly impenetrable barrier of bristling steel. It sounds practically invincible. Well, but I'm assuming there had to be some limitations to the phalanx. Of course, right? No military formation is perfect. The phalanx, for all its might, was relatively slow and cumbersome to maneuver. Okay. It was also vulnerable on its flanks, or requiring cavalry support to protect its sides. Why? But despite these limitations at the time, there was no army in the region that could surely match its power. And this innovation, combined with Philip II's strategic brilliance, led to a series of decisive victories for Macedon. And this leads us to the pivotal Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BC. Philip II leading his Macedonian forces, clashed with the combined might of Athens and Thebes. This was a battle that would determine the fate of Greece. It was what happened to Chaeronea. It was a devastating defeat for the Greek alliance. The Theban sacred band, an elite unit, made up of 150 pairs of lovers, fought with incredible bravery, but was ultimately wiped out. What a tragic story. It also inspiring at the same time. Absolutely add to the level of courage and devotion that I own alongside your love him, knowing the risks involved. Yeah, and with their defeat at Chaeronea, Philip II cemented Macedonian dominance over the Greek world. So his story's fascinating, but it really serves as a prelude to an even grander tale. The rise of his son, Alexander the Great. All legs then, as right, from Philip the cunning strategist to a son, Alexander. Become a legend, Alexander the Great. It's crazy how his story seems to be just as much about personality and destiny as it is about, military tactics. All those stories about his mother Olympias, supposedly dreaming of lightning striking her womb before his birth. Talk about foreshadow. It really adds to the mystique Gray's surrounding. Yeah, and even Philip himself reportedly had visions of his son inheriting a kingdom far grander than just Macedon. So you've got this backdrop of prophecy and destiny, and then you add the fact that he was tutored by Aristotle. Wow, yeah. What an incredible opportunity. Imagine the conversation of this brilliant young prince and the greatest philosopher of the age. Aristotle's teachings on logic, ethics, and politics undoubtedly shaped Alexander's worldview. But he wasn't just some passive recipient of knowledge. He was a voracious learner, always questioning, always seeking to apply what he learned to the real world. And that real world was about to become a whole lot bigger for Alexander. When Philip was assassinated in 336 BC, Alexander, just 20 years old, ascended to the throne. He didn't waste any time consolidating his power. Within 2 years, he had secured his position in Greece, put down rebellions in Thrace and Illyria, and was ready to embark on what would become one of the most audacious military campaigns in history. Okay, hold on. He was only 22 years old. Yep, when he decided to take on the Persian Empire. The same empire that had been this formidable adversary to the Greeks for centuries. That's right. Wow. It is pretty mind-blowing when you think about the sheer scale of his ambition at such a young age. This wasn't just a raid or a border skirmish. Alexander envisioned nothing less than the complete conquest of the Persian Empire, stretching from the Aegean Sea all the way to the Indus River. But he wasn't just some reckless youth charging into battle, was he? Of course not. There had to be some strategic thinking behind this seemingly impossible goal. Alexander was a brilliant military strategist. He inherited the formidable Macedonian army, honed by his father's reforms, so the phalanx was still a key element. It was, but Alexander also had a highly skilled cavalry and a keen ability to adapt his tactics to different terrains and opponents. So it was a combination of military strength, tactical flexibility, and perhaps a bit of youthful daring, maybe just a touch. But there was another factor working in Alexander's favor: the internal political landscape of the Persian Empire itself. There were rivalries among the Persian nobility, rebellious satraps and essentially provincial governors, and simmering resentment among the diverse peoples who had been conquered and incorporated into the empire. So this internal fragmentation made it easier for Alexander to exploit those divisions. That's right. So a bit of a divide-and-conquer strategy. It was, but even with those advantages, the sheer scale of his ambition is remarkable. Over the following decade, Alexander would lead his army to a series of astonishing victories. From the Granicus River to Issus to Gaugamela, eventually crushing the Persian Empire and ending the reign of Darius III. Those names carry so much weight. Each battle a turning point. In this epic clash of civilizations, it must have been an incredible journey. It was, but I imagine it wasn't always easy for Alexander and his forces. It was far from a smooth path. He faced setbacks, mutinies within his own ranks, grueling marches through incredibly harsh terrain, and fierce resistance from determined enemies. He even experienced personal loss and hardship along the way. The death of his closest friend Hephaestion during the campaign had a profound impact on him. So even amidst all the conquests and victories, there was this human element. To Alexander's story, it's a good reminder that even the greatest conquerors experience loss and hardship. They do. He really was a complex figure, wasn't it? He was. Driven by ambition, curiosity, and a thirst for knowledge. He was deeply interested in the cultures he encountered, who was often adopting local customs and integrating conquered peoples into his administration. He even married Roxana, a Bactrian princess, which definitely raised some eyebrows, I bet, among his Macedonian companions. But it really demonstrated his willingness to embrace different traditions and cultures. It did. That's such an interesting point. We often associate conquerors with brutality and oppression. But Alexander seems to have been different. In some ways, driven by this vision of a more interconnected world, where different cultures could coexist and learn from each other. It's a perspective historians continue to debate. Was he a visionary unifier, or was he ultimately just another empire builder? The answer is likely somewhere in between, probably. But there's no denying the profound impact his conquests had on the course of history. He spread Greek language and culture and ideas across vast territory, laying the groundwork for what we now call the Hellenistic period. That fusion of Greek and Eastern influences would have a lasting legacy on art, architecture, philosophy, and science. It's a reminder that the impact of these battles goes far beyond immediate casualties and territorial changes. They can spark cultural exchange, trigger the rise and fall of empires, and reshape the very course of civilizations. It's incredible, those ripple effects. But before we get too philosophical, there's one crucial aspect of Alexander's story we need to address. His death. The sudden and unexpected end to a whirlwind of conquest and ambition. Alexander died in Babylon in 323 BC at the age of 32. The circumstances surrounding his death remain shrouded in mystery. Malaria, typhoid fever, poison, or perhaps complications from all this battle wounds. It seems we may never know for sure. We may never know. What we do know is that his empire, vast and seemingly invincible, quickly fractured and fell apart without his leadership. It's a classic tragedy, isn't it? The brilliant, charismatic leader, cut down in his prime, his empire crumbling without his guiding hand. It evokes a real sense of pathos. It raises so many questions, like what? If Alexander had lived longer, could he have consolidated his empire and created a more lasting legacy of unity and cultural exchange? Or was his empire ultimately unsustainable, destined to crumble from within regardless of how long he lived? Those are great questions, and ones that historians continue to ponder. But for our purposes today, it's safe to say that Alexander the Great, through his conquests, his ambition, and his larger-than-life persona, left an indelible mark on history. A mark that continues to fascinate and inspire us centuries later. His story is a testament to the power of individual will, the allure of the unknown, and the enduring human desire to leave a mark on the world, for better or for worse. But that's just one part of the story of how battles have shaped European history, right? There's so much more ground to cover, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We had on the strategic maneuvering of Sparta, to the economic vulnerabilities of Athens, the rise of Macedon under Philip II, and the whirlwind conquests of Alexander the Great. It's been quite a journey. It's fascinating to see how all of these events are interconnected. They are seemingly isolated events whose individual decisions, even personal ambitions, can set off these chain reactions that reshape entire continents. It's like a historical butterfly effect, isn't it? Yeah, one small change, leading to unforeseen consequences. What if Sparta hadn't made that deal with Persia? Could Macedon have risen so quickly? If Philip hadn't been assassinated, would Alexander have had the opportunity to launch those incredible campaigns? It's impossible to say for sure. History is full of what-ifs. Those questions are part of what makes studying history so captivating. It challenges us to think critically, to analyze cause and effect, and to appreciate the complex interplay of factors that shape the course of human events. It reminds us that history isn't just this dry collection of facts and dates. It's a narrative driven by ambition, ingenuity, conflict, and cooperation. It's a story that continues to unfold, shaped by the choices we make and the actions we take. That's an important point. We aren't just passive observers of history, rather active participants shaping its trajectory with every choice we make. So by studying the past, understanding the successes and failures of those who came before us, we can gain valuable insights to form our own actions in the present. Exactly. It's about learning from those who came before us, recognizing patterns, pitfalls, and possibilities, and perhaps even learning how to avoid repeating some of the mistakes that have led to conflict and suffering. As we wrap up our deep dive today, I want to leave you with one final thought-provoking question. We've seen how Alexander's conquests bred Greek culture and ideas across vast territories, sparking a period of cultural exchange and innovation, right? But what if those conquests had never happened? What if Alexander had never ventured beyond Macedon? How would our world be different today? That's a huge question. It really makes you think about the ripple effects of historical events. The languages we speak, the ideas we hold dear, the world we live in, all shaped in some way by events that occurred centuries ago. It highlights how history is not static. It's a dynamic, ever-evolving narrative, and we're all part of that story. So do you go about your day? Think about those connections, the threads that tie us to the past and shape our future. Perhaps someday someone will be doing a deep dive into the events of our time. It's possible, analyzing the choices we made and the impact we had on the world. That's something to think about. It is. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a pleasure. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a new and captivating topic. Until then, keep those minds curious and stay tuned for more explorations into the past.